and it's a chance for you to talk with Mr. Bob Pollock about the issues with your yards and your gardens and all of those different things. Brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Having trouble with my intros today, Bob.
I see that.
Yeah, we're struggling.
Keep working on it.
We're struggling.
You'll get there.
Okay. Hey, what's going on out in the yard? We got some rain this week, and we have some more coming this weekend, huh? That helps.
Yes. Yeah, it does. Actually, for the last, that puts us back slightly ahead of normal for the year.
No kidding.
From January 1 until Wednesday the 11th, it shows we've received 40.3 inches of rain for the year, and that's 0.9 ahead of normal.
That tells you how wet it was in the winter and the spring, doesn't it? Because the summer sure wasn't.
That's right. Because, then if you look at the last 60 days, then we were at a deficit by almost 2 inches.
Yeah.
So we're slowly making that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the wintertime, of course, will be when we anticipate being able to build those water tables up all over again. So there's still some pressure on folks to conserve, but it's a little bit better now. A little bit better now. Yeah.
And a lot of that also depends on your water source and whether you have a shallow well or a deep well or a cistern or a spring, spring-fed. So all those do. Sometimes we take for granted the water will be there, and if we're on a municipal system, it's a little easier to say and think that. However, we have a lot of people that work off of wells and cisterns and springs, and that can be a totally different story.
I have the answer to this, but I want you to give it to me because you'll do it a lot better. When we think about what the rain has done to us and our yards and our waters and everything from this year, that's one thing. But as we look ahead, has there been damage done to next year's trees, for instance, and their ability to produce fruit by the lack of rain this year?
That's entirely possible because we've had a period of stress here over the summer months, and those are usually have a bigger impact because the weather's warmer, and so plants have to transpire and work harder to keep the moisture flowing and keep everything functioning. So that's and we've had just a period of stressors for the last 4 or 5 years because we don't have to think back very far to when we had excessive moisture. The ground was saturated for weeks or months at a time, and so that can very negatively influence root systems and the amount of oxygen in the soil because that air is moved out and replaced by water between all the soil particles, and so we can get into a situation where we can get root death from that, and then you come out of that, come into a damp spring, but not that bad, and then into a dry summer, and then we go the other direction and stress it on the dry side, opposite of the wet. So yes, that definitely plays into the life of living organisms, and so definitely could affect things for years down the road, actually.
Yeah. Well, that being the case, are we talking? Let's choose a fruit. Let's say an apple. Okay. Is it the number, the volume of the apples that can be produced, or the size, or the sweetness? What are some of those effects?
It can affect all of that. So when we get like with an apple tree, a perennial woody plant, and that plant already has made its buds, both leaf buds and flower buds, for next year that will come out in the spring. So that had to be made this summer into fall. So you can look at the tree now. Trees don't have any leaves for the most part, but you can look and you have branches, you have buds. And so if that plant was stressed over the summer months, then that can impact, if it's fighting to just stay alive and keep the leaves on the tree that are there, then that competes with trying to make leaf and flower buds for the following year.
Mm-hmm.
So we might have, our bloom might not be as strong and abundant next spring
Mm-hmm.
if those trees were really stressed this summer going into fall. So and then you can have weaker bloom. It also can affect the plant's ability to go dormant and be hardy enough. If it's already stressed now, then that can weaken it and make it more susceptible to winter damage, from cold and fluctuating cold temperatures. Although it is amazing how resilient, for the most part, plants are.
Well, you did tell me earlier this year that those trees are pretty smart. They know what's going to happen, so they overproduce when they sense that they're going to have a problem.
And with a apple tree, we only need less than 5% of the blossoms on the tree to be pollinated to have a full crop load. The other thing that will influence greatly return bloom for next year is the crop load that was on there this year. So if we don't thin, if we just completely let Mother Nature take its course,
Mm-hmm.
Those trees can have too many fruit, and when there's too many, then they don't get as big as they might otherwise get if we would thin the crop out a little bit. So we typically will have more smaller fruit if we don't do anything, and it gets over-pollinated. And then if we manage that a little bit, then we can have less fruit, but there'll be larger fruit.
So orchard owners literally go nip it in the bud. That must be where that expression comes from, huh?
And then pruning practices influence that. So we have less limbs, so then you're going to have less flower buds and less fruit on a tree because we're managing that, trying to keep it more open, have a good, strong branch structure so that it's able to support that fruit load when the time comes. Too many branches, and those trees a lot of times tend to overproduce branches and can get pretty thick and dense if we don't do annual pruning to keep them opened up.
Yeah.
And light is very important in a fruit tree to get quality fruit in well-colored fruit. So the denser it is, the darker it is in the tree, the less fruit that will be produced because it's too shaded. And then also shaded fruit don't color as well as fruit that have more sunlight penetrating into the tree.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was Christmas cactuses. I noticed that our cacti they've formed their buds already. Their flowers will be out here probably in another couple of weeks, and that's a little bit early for in the season. If you want them to bloom right at Christmas time, can you train those to bloom at a certain time?
Yes, like the poinsettias, they need that period of darkness. They can pretty much get it. We have one that's in full bloom right now, so we would call that a Thanksgiving cactus.
Veterans
Day cactus. It's going to bloom now versus a Christmas cactus. But yes, the photo length or the day length, and it's actually the length of the night, as long as that's long enough, just same with the poinsettias, then we will get the bud formation. Of course, in the case of the Christmas cactus, you have actual flowers that are going to bloom versus the poinsettia, which is the showy bracts, the leaves that turn color.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Just some.
So those need that period of darkness every day.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about this morning as well is I was looking at the dogwood tree the other day, and it is right next to the house, and it's getting up to where some of the top branches are reaching over, and they're going to be touching the gutters here soon. I need to get them trimmed back. It's going to be difficult because it's on a hill, and I don't know quite how I'm going to do it. But how severely can I trim those back and not affect that limb? Because dogwood trees, they're pretty sensitive, aren't they?
They can be, even though they're a native tree, they've had a lot of stressors over the last 20 to 30 years. We have a lot of what I call survivors. They're not as thrifty and they're slower growing, but they're hanging in there. They don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
They don't put as much growth on each year. However, they've survived. So I would be careful. So they're a spring blooming plant. So if you want, depending on how much you're going to remove, we could wait and do that pruning after they flower in the spring,
Okay.
right after that.
Mm-hmm.
Now with the native flowering dogwood, we also get the nice red berries on there also.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little hard to prune those and not affect either the flowers or the fruit load on there. So you could just say, I'm just going to go do it. And usually, and if you sacrifice a few flowers and a few fruits, you still have the rest of the tree there.
Uh-huh.
But I would only prune back what you need to keep it from whipping against the house and growing into the house. And you might have to take a whole branch off back to the main trunk, or you might just have to remove a couple branches back to where they're attached to a larger branch, and that might take care of it.
All right. There you go. This has been a productive segment, at least for me. You've answered a few questions. Now I have some things to do. Thanks, Robert, for spending some time with us today.
You're welcome. And now's a great time to put fencing around plants and things that you don't want the deer to munch on this winter either. It's that time of year when some of the wildlife start to be foraging around more, and we may need to do some extra protection on our plants before they mow them down.
Yeah, that's a really good plan. Thanks, sir.
You're welcome.
Have a great weekend.
You also.